On the night of February 29th, 2000, in a quiet Australian town, police walked into a home expecting a domestic dispute. What they found was something so grotesque, so unspeakable, it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. A man brutally murdered, his body skinned and decapitated. Parts of him were found in a pot on the stove. Dinner plates had been set, each with his flesh served beside baked vegetables. This is not a horror movie. This is the true story of Katherine Knight, first woman in Australian history sentenced to life without parole, and one of the most disturbing killers the world has ever known. Katherine Knight was not born into peace. She was forged in chaos. Born in 1955 in the small town of Tenterfield, New South Wales, Katherine's early life was marred by trauma. Her mother, Barbara, had an affair with a violent man, Katherine's father, Ken Knight. He was an abusive alcoholic who raped Barbara, sometimes in front of their children. Katherine idolized her mother, but Barbara would often confide in her young daughter about the worst parts of her marriage, including the violence and the sex. By age 5, Katherine was already being conditioned by horror. She grew up angry, volatile. At school, she attacked other students, even teachers. She was expelled multiple times. And at home, her behavior got darker. She began collecting blades, knives, anything sharp. By 15, she dropped out of school, completely illiterate. But she quickly found work in the one place that would accept her, a slaughterhouse. There, she thrived. Katherine didn't just tolerate the blood, she enjoyed it. Cow carcasses, pig screams, none of it fazed her. She became a butcher, skilled, efficient, precise. She was so proud of her knives, she brought them home, hung them above her bed. So, as she put it, they'd always be handy, just in case. The violence didn't stay at work. It followed her into every relationship. Her first husband, David Kellett, was a hard-drinking railroad worker. But even he was terrified of her. She stabbed him, beat him. Once, while he was asleep, she straddled him, a knife in hand, whispering that she'd kill him if he ever cheated. That wasn't the only time she tried. Neighbors called the police more than once, but every time she charmed her way out of it, or threatened those who spoke up. By the late 1990s, Katherine's rage was unpredictable. She had been institutionalized, but never stayed long. Doctors called her manipulative and dangerous. And then she met John Price, a father, a friend, a man who had no idea what kind of nightmare was about to walk into his life. And once she walked in, she would never leave. John Price had seen his share of trouble, a hard-working miner, a single father, and by all accounts, a good man. But when Katherine Knight entered his life, she brought a storm he couldn't escape. They met in 1993. Katherine was bold, charming, when she wanted to be. And John, he liked the attention. Within weeks, she'd moved into his home in Aberdeen. At first, it was just arguments, shouting matches that spilled into the street. Then it got darker. She smashed his things, threatened his children. One night, she even slit the throat of his dog, just to show him what she could do. But John stayed. Every time he tried to leave, she reeled him back in, with apologies, promises. And when that didn't work, she used fear. In 2000, Katherine did something unforgivable. She recorded John's old medical records, then sent them to his boss. The accusation got him fired. 20 years of work gone overnight. John finally kicked her out, told friends and coworkers, "If I don't show up tomorrow, it's because she killed me." They thought he was joking. He wasn't. On February 29, 2000, he filed a restraining order. That night he went home, locked the doors. But Katherine had already made her move. She bought a black nightgown, took her butcher's knives, and walked into the darkness toward John's house. The trap had been set, and John Price would never leave that house alive. March 1st, 2000, 8 a.m. John Price didn't show up for work. His co-workers remembered what he'd said. "If I'm not here tomorrow, it means she killed me." They called the police. At 8:10 a.m., officers arrived at Price's house. His car was still in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. The house was silent. They knocked. No answer. So they forced their way in. What they found shook even the most experienced detectives. The hallway walls were splashed with blood, a long trail, smeared handprints, signs of a struggle that moved from room to room, and in the lounge, there he was, or what was left of him. John Price had been stabbed 37 times, in the chest, back, and neck. Katherine had attacked him in his sleep, and when he tried to escape, she chased him through the house, stabbing him again and again. Eventually, he collapsed near the front door, but she wasn't done. She dragged his body back inside, used her butchering skills to do something unspeakable. She skinned him carefully, removing his entire hide in one piece, then hung it on a meat hook in the lounge. His decapitated body was found seated in a chair, his head in a pot, boiling on the stove, alongside vegetables and gravy. She'd set the table for two, with a note beside each plate, one for each of John's children. It wasn't just murder, it was a message. When police found Katherine, she was barely conscious. She'd taken a cocktail of pills trying to stage a suicide, but she lived, and the horror she left behind would haunt everyone who entered that house. Katherine Knight was arrested the same day John Price's body was discovered. At the station, she claimed to remember nothing. She said she had no idea what had happened, but the evidence told a different story. Her fingerprints were on the knife. John's blood was all over the house, on walls, door frames, furniture. And the video camera she brought to the scene? It contained chilling footage of her calmly panning across the room, hours before the murder. Psychiatrists were called in. Some believed she suffered from borderline personality disorder. Others said it was psychosis brought on by trauma. But her history was undeniable. Violent outbursts, threats, assaults. She'd harmed every partner she ever had, and now she'd finally gone all the way. Her defense team tried to argue mental illness. They claimed she was incapable of understanding the consequences of her actions. But prosecutors disagreed. They said she knew exactly what she was doing. She brought the knives, she cooked the meal. She set the table for John's children, with pieces of their father in the pot. When the trial began in October 2001, she pled not guilty. But as the evidence mounted, graphic photos, autopsy reports, witness testimony, she changed her plea to guilty, likely to avoid the trauma of the details being made public in court. She showed no emotion, no apology, no explanation, and the judge, he didn't hold back. He sentenced Katherine Knight to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the first woman in Australian history to receive such a sentence. The judge called her crime appalling, almost beyond comprehension in a civilized society. John Price was buried quietly, a father, a friend, a man who warned the world what was coming and still wasn't believed. His children never recovered. His town, Aberdeen, still wears the scar of that night. Katherine Knight remains behind bars at Silverwater Women's Correctional Center. She's never shown remorse, never admitted what she did. She spends her days in isolation, locked away from the world she once terrified. To this day, the crime scene photos are sealed. too disturbing for public release. Even seasoned investigators say it was the worst they'd ever seen. What Katherine did wasn't just murder, it was domination, control. A final, horrific message from a woman who always wanted power, even in death. And it reminds us, sometimes the real monsters live behind familiar faces.